everyone. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and today I am here with Alex Nimchevsky. Hello, Alex.
Hey, Kelly.
Thanks so much for coming on. So we are here to talk about BallotReady. Can you tell us just a little bit about what BallotReady is?
Yeah, so at BallotReady, we know that when most people go to vote, they are ready to vote for president or who's ever at the top of the ticket. But then when they get to the voting booth, they're faced with this ballot that has all these local offices that they don't really know what they are, like water reclamation district commissioner. And then there are all these candidates whose names they don't recognize. So at BallotReady, we make it really easy to know who you're voting for. We make online voter guides that show voters their entire ballot and background information about all the candidates and referendums so that voters can be totally informed when they go vote.
So we'll dive into that in a minute, but can we start by talking a little bit about how BallotReady came about? What's the history of it?
In 2014, I knew the midterms were coming up and I knew my ballot was going to be really long. So I just made a website for myself to keep track of all the candidates. And I had like over 85 races on the ballot. And I made just a site for myself. It was ugly, but useful. And then the first person I called was my friend from college. And she had, a few months before that, called me and she was like, "Hey, I'm running for local office. Will you vote for me?" And I was like, I didn't even realize there was an election going on. And she ended up winning. She won by 16 votes. And we started working on this. And we soon realized that this wasn't just a problem that we had, but it was a problem that like literally everyone we met had. We talked to political science professors who admitted to guessing on their ballot. We talked to political reporters who maybe knew in detail about like one ward, but they didn't know about everything that would be on their ballot. So our mission was to make it easy for everybody to be totally informed.
So you said that was 2014, the midterms that you started thinking about it?
Right.
So when did the first iteration of this go live?
So what we did first was we did voter behavior research to figure out what information would be most useful for voters. So we interviewed over 150 Chicagoans across the city. And then we had our first public guide up for Chicago's municipal runoff election in 2015.
Yeah, and for anyone who is not in Chicago, Chicago ballots are enormous and ugly and involve a lot of different kinds of offices and a lot of different kinds of judgeships and things like that.
And Illinois, in particular, is a very great place to start this because it has the highest number of elected officials per person. So, given person is represented by an average of 70 different elected officials in Illinois, which is insane, but it does mean that voters here need a lot of help when they go to vote.
Yes, indeed. So you had that in 2015 for the municipal runoff. And then what has happened since then? You were in the 2016 election. Did you have both the primary and the general election guides?
So in 2015, we also covered Kentucky's gubernatorial election. We used the elections that year to get feedback from voters, get feedback on the design, and we kept iterating on what it should look like, what information we were providing. In 2016, we did the Illinois primary along with 5 other primaries. In the fall, for the general, we covered 12 states with every candidate and referendum on every ballot in those states.
So, BallotReady now is a very comprehensive website. So I've used it I've already voted in the Democratic primary this year, and I used it to prep my ballot. So maybe we could talk through a little bit what it looks like and what the users can do when they're in the website. So the first thing you come to is the screen asking you for your address. And so it looks like that then sort of starts to populate it. Does it use Google Maps to populate that?
Yes.
And then it figures out from there what your ballot will look like.
All the races on the ballot and who's running in them.
And for the primaries, then you can choose either Democrat or Republican or Green or Independent, I think something like that, for my ballot at least. So you can see the races, the candidates, And then you have three different tabs here, one called biography for each candidate, one called stances, and one called endorsements. So can you talk a little bit about what makes up each of those?
So first of all, we're aggregating information on the candidates, and we're pulling from different sources like their websites, their social media, news articles about them, questionnaires they fill out for other organizations. And biography is their previous work history, committees or volunteering opportunities that they've been a part of. Stances are their stances on issues related to the office they are running for. So, for example, a water reclamation commissioner candidate, we wouldn't show their stance on abortion because that's irrelevant to their office. But we might show their stance on, say, sanitation and sewage. And then endorsements, we aggregate all the public officials and organizations that endorse the candidates so voters can see in one place all their endorsements. And for judges, for example, in Chicago at least, there are 12 bar associations that make ratings for the judicial candidates. So we display all of those ratings next to each candidate's name.
And from each of these, so from the bio, for instance, when you're looking at a candidate, you can see right there a link to the website, the Twitter feed, Facebook, if they have those.
Yeah, and next to each piece of information on the site, there's a little booklet. That is a link to the source of the information.
Okay, so you can as well judge the sources for where that comes from.
Right.
And then there is a little button next to each candidate that says Add to my ballot. So if you're looking at the screen, let's say I'm looking at the Illinois governor page, I can look at my options. I've read through all of these things, and then I can say, okay, I've decided that I'm going to vote for this person and click the button and add it to the ballot.
Right, because we know the ballot is so long, we wanted it to be easy to create a list of all the candidates you plan on voting for so you can prepare ahead of time and just have your list ready and then complete your ballot when you get there. Once you've saved, you can either pull it up on the BallotReady site on your phone in the voting booth if you're in Chicago. In some places, you're not allowed to do that, so just ask your polling place staff. Or we have a button so you can print out the list of candidates that you've saved, and you can always bring that in wherever you're voting.
You can also email your ballot. So in my case, I emailed my ballot to my husband and told him that's who he should vote for.
That is exactly why we created that, because when we asked people how do you get information about who to vote for, one of the most reliable sources for people in local elections was like what people would say, oh, there's this lawyer in my neighborhood and I always ask her about all the judicial candidates. Or for school board, I always ask the principal of my elementary school for his input on school board candidates, for example. So we made it easy to email, so you could email it to those people, could email it to all the people that they know are going to ask them for advice on their ballot.
It was great. It was very helpful that I could make sure my husband, who trusted me to do all the research for both of us. The other button that I really like on here is a plan to vote button.
Mm-hmm.
So I used this when I was trying to determine when the polling place was going to be open, and then there's like a little calendar that comes up and says early voting days and election day. If you click on one, it'll say, you said you're going to vote this day, and we'll tell you where your polling place is. And then you can also have it just add straight to your calendar. So then my calendar said, hey, remember you said you were going to vote right now.
We created this because we know one of the biggest obstacles to people voting is they aren't sure where their polling place is, or they don't know what days, like they don't know the logistics. And sometimes it can be hard to find. So what we did is we looked at all this behavioral science research that is proven to increase voter turnout, and we developed this website to make it really easy. to know what you need to go vote. So things like on the site, we ask you to choose a time that you want to go vote. And that's because research shows that if you plan ahead, you're more likely to do something. And specifically, there's research around voter turnout that proves that you're more likely to vote if you plan the time when you're going to go vote. It's sort of obvious. That's why we make calendar appointments in general. But we wanted this to all be in one place so that voters could quickly find information.
And so when you say we, who all is on your team at this point?
I co-founded BallotReady with Aviva Rossman, she's our COO, and Sebastian Ellefson, he's our director of content, so he's our elections expert. We've just hired our 10th full-time employee, so we are growing so that we can be in all 50 states by the elections this fall.
What are all of those people doing? What all goes into putting all of this together?
So the biggest part is getting the data that makes up a ballot. And the hardest part of that is we have to go to local municipal boards of elections to gather data on when elections are, who's running, what time polling places are open. And the problem is often we have to make phone calls. Sometimes they require that we send requests via fax. So we had to figure out how to do that. Sometimes we send emails to them and they respond via snail mail. So it is labor intensive. We also automatically scrape data from candidate websites, boards of election sites, and track whether anything on the site changes so we can update it on our end. So we have some researchers doing that work. We have some software engineers who are creating tools that automatically gather the data, and product people so we can figure out the design of the site so it's most useful for voters.
When I log into this, I'm not asked to pay any money and I don't see any ads on this site. How is this funded?
We make money by selling the API access to the data on when elections are, who's running for office. We sell this to civic organizations that want to get more voters involved. We sell this to partisan groups that want to tell their members which candidates they support. Basically, anyone who really cares about elections, we make this data accessible to them.
And do you have an app or is it a mobile site for phones?
It is a mobile friendly site. So it's mobile first designed. We didn't want people to have to download a whole new app while they're at their polling place. So it means you can either pull it up on your desktop, laptop, or your phone.
And it's a very pretty site. I really like it. I'm a big font snob, so I like the fonts that are used.
We got a new font last year that we are all in love with, so it's good. It's good too.
Of course, I'm looking at Chicago ballots, and so that's probably, since you are based in Chicago, that's probably the one that's always going to have the best information. But I like that there are pictures of each of the candidates, so I can sort of put that together in my mind with commercials I've seen and, things I've seen people speaking in public. So that I think is also really helpful, at least for the bigger races, to be able to do that.
We've worked with MIT to study the effects on turnout, and we've been thinking about doing a study with them where we actually show voters no pictures of the candidates. So basically randomly show some voters no photos and some voters all the information plus photos and see if that has any effect on turnout or which candidates they save, because there's so much research that shows voters are more likely to vote for a candidate that is of their same ethnicity. So I think it's useful too to see their photos just so you know who they are, because that's like a really memorable way to see who they are. But we're interested to see that and like many other things, how it affects turnout overall.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to see. So it seems like you could do then a lot of different kinds of research from this. Are there plans, you talked about maybe partnering with MIT to do that. Are there other kinds of behavioral research that you're thinking of incorporating into this?
One thing we've done already is we've researched of the people who use the site who actually turns out. And we've seen that BallotReady users are, when controlling for demographics and voting history, are 20% more likely to turn out. And that's huge. We keep studying that with each election because obviously a lot has happened since we started in 2015, and we're tracking that number to see how it depends on the size of the election, whether it's an off year or midterm year. So we're going to keep doing that.
That's terrific. And